There's a quote I love by Howard Thurman, and he says, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and do that, because what the world really needs is for people to come alive." For many years, I came alive through my curiosity, through traveling, through interviewing amazing people. I had spent the better part of 3 years recording these incredible interviews, but inside I had this judgment because in my previous life, living in New York, I had launched this big music festival with these incredible names, and it was around philanthropy, and I was very proud of it. But I felt like in stepping into this new chapter, somehow I was taking a step down. As the years went by and I realized I still had been sitting on the sidelines waiting to sing my song, I kind of came to the realization that what if time passes and I never share this unique voice and this unique vision that is my distinct song? It was in December of last year when I saw Fleetwood Mac tickets come up, and I love Fleetwood Mac. I've been a fan for years. So I go to this Fleetwood Mac show, and they do a tribute at the end of the show for their encore to Tom Petty. And I had always wanted to go see Tom Petty. In fact, the year before, a friend of mine threw a festival, and he was the headliner. And it was literally a phone call and an hour's drive away. But I thought, oh, I'll go next year. Well, of course, there was no next year. Tom Petty passed away. And so as I was sitting there, I realized tomorrow's never promised. And I didn't want to die with my song still in me. And so I decided that I would finally launch my podcast. What I've come to realize is that we all have this unique resonant song within us, and it's up to us to put it out into the world. And it's not about who's listening, how many people, what they think. It's about you singing your song in your unique way. And so my hope for you is that whatever your song is, whatever your music is, whatever your inspiration is, put it out there, because it's in the process, in the iterative process of us sharing our unique song, that we truly find our music.
Michael, thank you so much for opening up and sharing your Am I Being Real story with us here today.
Pleasure, my man.
It is so deeply relatable. I think all of us in some realm can relate to not sharing a part of ourselves that we feel like we need to share. And I like that the metaphor that you used was sharing our song, because I think that's a really beautiful way of saying that and kind of letting it out. I know for me, when I sing, it's so liberating. And I think it's really important, especially to live a fulfilling, authentic life that we actually express and, be the person who we truly are. I don't want to find myself on my deathbed and having not shared something that I want to share, or having not done something that I want to do.
Yeah. I think, first of all, thank you. I think that, I think unfortunately the graveyard is full of people who have died with their songs within them, because I think, unfortunately, for many of us, obviously it takes courage to share. And, it's taken me a couple of years to sort of share this next chapter song, so to speak. But what I think about is, in traditional societies and in tribes, you were defined by your contribution to the community, right? And I think there's something really beautiful in figuring out what that unique contribution is. And, it's not necessarily an easy process, but I think it is an iterative one. I think it's like, you may sing your song and it may not resonate with everyone at first. And it may not even be about resonating with everyone. But there's something really valuable in the process and the vulnerability, which I know is something you celebrate, of getting on stage anyway. I just read, I don't know if have you read David Goggins' book?
No, I haven't, but I've heard it's great.
It's amazing.
I know our producer Franco has read it.
It's incredible. So it was like number 2 behind Michelle Obama's book a couple weeks ago. What was amazing about it was this man grew up with no advantage, right? Like literally, father was profoundly abusive, like lived in a $7 a month, like subsidized apartment, African American man in a county in a small town, literally bordered by the Ku Klux Klan. Was a 300-pound cockroach sprayer, and decided that his song was he wanted to become a Navy SEAL. He knew he had his gift in him, and he was relentlessly committed to sharing it. He literally defines mental fortitude in the most relatable way, because he didn't have any, there was no advantage handed to him. In fact, every disadvantage. And the man goes through buds, which is the most challenging physical challenge. He qualifies, loses 100 pounds, goes through buds, which kicks out most of the most fit people on the planet. He goes through it, gets kicked out, not because of personal effort, but because of injury, has to do it again, and then has to do it again. And just it goes to show the power of tenacity. And if you have something within you that you feel is your unique song, if you're relentlessly committed to it, you figure it out. Like I feel like there's always a way. And so I haven't figured it all out, but I'm committed to finding the way.
I love it. Thank you for your honesty and for being real. And, you talked about back in the times of tribes and everyone kind of had their own role, the way that they participate. I know it's a little blurrier now in the society where we're not living as entrenched, tighter tribes. We're living in a big civilization, like in Los Angeles with several million people. There's a lot of people that have the same roles. There's several bankers, there's several tailors. I don't know why I'm using tailors as an example, but there's a lot of people who have the same trait. So I think that it's just a different world, especially when you put in technology and innovation as to what people finding what their unique role is or what their unique voice is. And I think it's it's part of process of self-discovery and trying new things out and kind of singing and practicing and seeing what your song is. But I think another element of it is the feedback of society and seeing how other people see you. Because to me, I think that is valuable, where like if other people give you feedback as to what they think your best qualities are, maybe that'll shine a light on something that you thought was a weakness that's actually a strength. And that could be, the gateway to something that is, a career or a hobby or a passion that could be really fulfilling and satisfying for you.
100%. I think oftentimes those things that we're most vulnerable about, there's so many different directions we could go with this, but like, Brene Brown talks about like, the sort of the power of releasing. She talks about it in the context of shame, but the power of releasing those sort of secrets within you. But I think even in the context of our gifts, which oftentimes can be related to our challenges or our obstacles or those things within us that we're hesitant to share, feedback is powerful. But I think there's just merit in putting it out there and having the courage to put it out there in the first place, right? Like, so just standing on your own 2 feet and being like, okay, regardless of what the feedback is, this is my truth. You make a really valid point, which is we're not living in tribal society, right? Like we currently are living in Los Angeles. We're moving culturally in a way where most people are moving into urban environments, and there's no playbook for 21st century living, right? Like most of the systems we have around us are oriented towards an industrial capitalist paradigm, like our education system, our healthcare system, and we live in a kind of a brave new world. And so we're all kind of trying to figure it out, right? Like we're all trying to figure out the playbook. And your song or your gift is about how you evoke the song or the gift of the other, because you're not seen as separate. And so the key to me is how do we find or tap into that unique contribution that is our unique contribution for ourselves, and then figure out how is it relatable or a contribution to those around us.
Sure. I love that. And I think, your podcast, I'm so excited for it to be birthed out into the world, because I know you've been spending years interviewing people like the Dalai Lama and Deepak Chopra and Maria Sharapova, and people who are just tremendous innovators and leaders in their fields, or as you like to call them, peak minds of our time. And I know you've been working so hard on it, and now you're releasing it. And I'm sure you have a vision, I know you have a vision for Peak Mind and what you think it can be and the impact it'll have on others. And then, when you birth that child, it's its own entity.
Yes.
And people are going to respond to it the way that they respond to it. That's kind of out of your control once you put it out there. So I know a lot of times I'll come up with an idea, like for this podcast when I had the podcast, or for the app I'm developing, Love Bomb. And I'll have this idea, I'll see this vision, but then as I actually take the steps, other things unfold that I could not have possibly seen from the vantage point when I started.
Yes.
So I think that it's good to have an idea and have hope and vision and believe in yourself, but until you take the steps, you can't really, the road won't unfold and show up until you actually take action.
100%, and inherently and inevitably it will take totally different form, right? But it's actually in those first steps. I mean, I actually think one of the things that's really beautiful is thinking about that journey of what is that next step in front of you, right? As any of us are working to birth, whether it be your listeners, whatever they're working to birth in their life. I've looked at some of these peak minds, and what I found to be a consistent way of being or strategy, if you will, is segmentation, right? So like when I had the idea for the Dalai Lama event, or had the idea for we had the idea for Global Citizen, it's like it's this huge idea, but if you break it down into its component parts, and by the way, it will totally evolve to be different from your initial inception idea, but the power is in how do you segment that goal down into those component parts, and exactly as you said, like focus on that which is right in front of you. Like, I don't know if you ever saw Into the Void, but it's this incredible movie. It's a true story about this guy who was hiking and literally is in like this Andean peak and is left for dead because he falls into a glacier. So if you can imagine, he climbs out of this glacier and his femur is literally, not to get graphic, but is like he's broken his bone such that he can't like put any pressure on his leg. The way that he did it was he would just focus on the 10 feet in front of him. And he'd be like, how do I walk, crawl, endure whatever pain I have to get 10 feet in front? And he makes it down, and miraculously he lives. But it's an extreme story, but I think you just figure out the next 10 feet.
Right.
There's real magic in that.
I like that. So the combination of having the ultimate vision, but focusing on the next 10 feet, I think that's probably an element or a principle of having a peak mind. This show is all about being real and being authentic. So I wanted to ask you where like the intersection is between authenticity and having a peak mind.
It's a beautiful question. To me, the people that have, to me, peak mind is an idea, right? So in a way, it's around consciousness. It's around performance. It's around our unique gift and finding our unique gift, or song, as the case may be. To me, authenticity is central to that, right? If we look at any of the musicians we love in the world, no matter what your genre of music, what we love about them is they've found their own unique expression, right? And that expression has found resonance. So I think there is a level of mastery, but inherently I think that mastery has to be paired with it being an authentic expression of you. And I think that take mastery even out of the equation. I think, to me, authenticity is about vulnerable sharing of our unique gifts. And I think whether it be these sort of big names, or whether it be, I'm just making this up, but a fisherman on the southern coast of Sri Lanka, if that's what brings him great joy and passion, and that's his unique expression, then to me, that's a peak mind. What is it that leads to a standing ovation, right? Like, there's lots of speakers that go on stage and deliver incredibly profound content. In my experience, the ones that get the standing ovation, it's a unique blend of an extraordinary sharing of that which is unique within them, but also a vulnerability in that sharing, because it's us relating to them in their gift. I think in us acknowledging the strength of both the combination of that vulnerability and that powerful expression that we deeply yearn for within ourselves, that we acknowledge. This is my own perception. Take it or leave it, could be right or wrong, but I think that there's this beautiful meeting point between sharing your song, doing it vulnerably, and it being seen as something authentic that actually is a peak expression.
I really love that. And it makes me think in terms of like this idea of having a peak mind. To me, there's a level of clarity there. And to me, in order to be clear and to be able to see things clearly, I need to be in resonance with myself. I need to have self-acceptance. And to me, that's free of a lot of the resistance of whether it's not accepting myself, not accepting others, being tied to, limiting beliefs or stories that I've told myself about the past as to what I think I'm capable of. Maybe it's in terms of how much money I can make, or, you know, whether I'm worthy of the dream relationship and all those things. And I feel like having a peak mind is that level of acceptance and authenticity, so I can see the big picture in order to, you know, best operate.
100%. And what that's bringing up for me, what it's evoking is, you know, it's also a lot of this, there's sort of the inner game and the outer game, right? A lot of what we reference, and what I love about what you reference, is this authenticity, which to me goes to like, what's that inner work? And, you know, a lot of us obviously were besieged by the world around us, which is this sort of the outer. But I think a lot about the analogy of a tree. And I've been thinking about this a fair amount lately, right? To me, it's like, if you want to grow yourself, your message, your unique song in the world into this grand tree, it can only grow to the degree that you are rooted, right? A potted plant will only grow to the degree to which it's allowed to in the context of that pot, right? So it's like, and if you use the soil or those roots as the analogy for the inner work, I think we have to get really authentic with ourselves and dig our roots deep and do the work within before we can actually birth the work without. I can say from in a personal way, like, I didn't feel yet ready to share with the world, you know, this my vision, which was a big vision for the podcast, because I didn't feel I was ready yet within to hold that space. You know, there's a famous story of Gandhi where a mother came to him and said, you know, can you tell my son not to eat these sugary foods? It's not good for him. And he said, well, can you come back in 2 weeks? And she said, yes. And she comes back in 2 weeks, and he tells the child, can you stop eating these sugary sweets? And she said, why didn't you just do that 2 weeks ago? And he said, because I had to stop eating sugary sweets, right? And it's a simple story, but it's like, until we start to practice what we preach, that song will never have its resonance, because I think we can all sniff out what is inauthentic. That doesn't mean we have to have figured it all out, but I didn't feel yet that I was at a place where I was practicing enough of what I was learning to fully be able to preach it.
Thank you for your honesty. And I'm kind of curious, with that truth, as to why you think you had that block in terms of being able to practice what you believe to be true. And I know you're an incredibly intelligent man, and you've been very successful in your career. So I'm kind of curious to know, like, the story you were telling yourself as to what was holding you back, and then kind of what that pivotal moment was that you're like, all right, it's time now. I'm ready. I've done the work, and I'm ready to birth this into the world.
Yeah. Well, I haven't really ever shared this before, but there's a variety of layers to that, to be totally real. But in essence, a lot of it was around ego, you know, and also really feeling like, is this my gift? And what I mean by that is, with Global Citizen, that was a pure expression of my heart and soul. And, you know, obviously it was built with an incredible team, but, you know, the vision there was, how do we build a movement to end extreme poverty? And to me, that was a movement built in hope and inspiration. And we found a unique resonance. You know, we found a resonance where millions of people banded together, and, you know, it gathered the attention of many of the world's sort of biggest names, you know, from Jay-Z, Beyonce, Oprah's, and folks like that. And so, and it gestated, you know, billions of dollars in new commitments for programs serving the world's poor. So that was a pure expression. However, to be honest, I also felt like then, okay, going from that, which, when my dad got diagnosed with dementia, I did some deep soul searching, and we went to South Africa, and it was on that trip, and I know you had a similar journey that you've taken with your dad, that I realized working, well, one, Global Citizen was then well on its way, you know, to being an established entity, but two, I wasn't going to be able to be there in the way I wanted to be there for my father, either financially or in terms of time, to continue that journey. And so I walked away, but I walked away without knowing what the next step was. I didn't know what I was going to do. And in the same way that I talked about with that Elizabeth Gilbert, you know, when you have this sort of big freshman success, like she did with her book, Eat, Pray, Love, it's hard to step into the next chapter and write that next book. And so for me, I felt like anything I did in comparison to Global Citizen was small. and not only small, but felt like a failure. And so there was a lot of vulnerability that had to come from me embracing the fact that, even if it was quote unquote smaller, it was still worthy. Why? Because it was a unique expression of my curiosity and the next stage in the journey. And ultimately, the truth I came to within that felt right. It felt like I was in my rightness was, and I don't mean that in a righteous way. I mean more as in like aligned. I came to the deep belief that ultimately the world is a manifestation of our collective internal states. And until we foster the tools and context whereby people can get really into their own internal rightness, the world will always be a manifestation of that collective state. Almost, there's this incredible statistic where they talk about lottery winners and former athletes, right? And like 80 or 90% of lottery winners go back to their default income after winning the lottery. Why? Because they haven't yet developed the tools within, the sense of worthiness, the know-how to be able to hold that newfound windfall. And I think ostensibly the same is true with our lives. If we don't yet have the mindset and have done the inner work, we won't be able to create that incredible abundance and be able to hold the worthiness of that abundance in the world. And so to me, I'm really interested now in creating impact from the inside out.
Awesome. I love it. And I can totally relate to what you're saying and having a podcast about being real and authentic, which I believe, at its core and its like, true essence that, we all want to feel like we're here for a reason. We all feel like we want to be accepted for who we are and that we can be whoever we want to be. I don't think I'm going on a limb, by saying that. I agree with you that it starts, from the inside out. I think the challenge there is, a lot of people in the society are just, looking to make money so they can pay their bills, and, take care of some of their most, basic needs. So what I like about Peak Mind is this idea as an entry point. I think it's very attractive, this idea of having a peak mind. I don't know why anyone would not want to have a peak mind. Yeah. So I think that that's a great, essentially, on-ramp into doing the deeper work that if you were just saying, we're going to help you with the inner work, people are not going to be as attracted to that. They're going to be more attracted to this idea of having a peak mind because they think that that will support them in some of the more tangible, outward-facing things like, if I have a peak mind, I'm going to make more money, I'm going to be a better parent, etc.
100%. I think what you just touched on is the sort of special sauce, if you will, right? Like you've actually got to present information. I feel like where people are. I often think about okay, this is great, but what about the mom in Wichita, Kansas with 3 kids who's just literally trying to find 15 minutes in her day to meditate, right? It's how do you speak to those people? And I think everyone's coming from a different perspective and a different place in their life. So my interest is how do you present information and tools that are relatable to all those different people, and then come onto the on-ramp wherever they are in their life.
Yep. I find it to be just such an incredible lesson that I continue to learn, as I continue to build Are You Being Real and, roll out Love Bomb and roll out this new method I've been developing called the Art of Kindfluence, where it's really meeting people where they're at to help them solve their problems and give them some of that special sauce, some of that inner work that I think ultimately allows for a lot of healing and allowing us to share our songs and develop our gifts in a way that is both giving and interpersonal, or on an individual level, also fulfilling and satisfying. So a question that I have for you, Michael, is as I alluded to, I am developing this concept called kindfluence, which to me is, as human beings, when we interact with other people, we're naturally going to have influence on them. It could be something as simple as pushing somebody away, or it could be a neutral response where someone leaves an interaction with us kind of indifferent, or someone could leave an interaction with us feeling maybe better than they already felt, or feeling connected or even supported. So I'm a firm believer that there's little things that we can do to be kind. It's kind of a kindfluence that can be really supportive in terms of walking away from our interactions with other people.
Yes.
Simple tools that we can implement that essentially creates win-win situations.
Sure.
Where both people feel like they get their needs met, and they also connect on kind of a deep level. And there's a nuance about it. So the reason why I bring that up is because I think of you as a kindfluencer in a lot of different regards and realms. So I've seen you time and time again at social events, and your ability to connect with people and just go up confidently to people is really uncanny, and I think one of your superpowers. So I wanted to learn more about your approach and how you do that, or if there's like a specific, like mechanism or what you do to connect with people. I'm just really curious.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for the acknowledgement. It means a lot to me. I don't know that I necessarily haven't thought about it in a way that I could probably distill it down in the most eloquent way, but I'll take a shot at it. I think for me, I think from as early as I can remember, I've always derived a sense of joy and purpose in authentically connecting with people. I remember even when I was a teenager, I would kind of judge the success of my day based on how many serendipitous connections would happen. And especially like with the bus driver, or like I go to yoga down the street, and there's a gentleman who runs the parking lot, and we just have this unique rapport where he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Doing great." He's always like, "Enjoy your class," and I'm like, "Thank you, my man. Have a beautiful day." I don't know that necessarily speaks to your point, but I think I derive so much joy from that, even though it's not this like deep, this deep connection in a sense where it's like we're like best friends. But I think in every moment we have the opportunity to give people the gift of our presence, like our true presence. And you have a unique gift and a unique song within you. I don't necessarily know what that is, but I'm damn intent to find out, and I may not find out in this conversation, but I'm just, I think, relentlessly curious. And one of the things I've found in my inquiry of other people is the people that are the most vital and alive are the people that are most curious.
I think that's very accurate for like our relationship. Like one of my favorite things about our friendship is our like conversations, whether in person or over the phone. We go deep, and you are deeply curious. You love asking questions about my experience or my insight, and you're very good at asking questions that like I feel you genuinely care about me.
Yes.
And at the same time, I can tell that you're also learning.
Yes.
There's that curiosity there. So I think that definitely resonates with me. Wanted to ask you one more follow-up question before we get to the next one in regards to kind of that breaking the ice and relationship building, because we all have that, going out and about in public, if we go to a networking event or, whenever we see someone who may be like across the room who we want to start a conversation with, you're very disarming. You go in, you get in there. So I'm just curious. I want to see if we can distill it down just a little bit further in terms of the approach and how you make someone feel comfortable. Is it a compliment? Is it a question?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. So if I actually think about it, so just before this, I was getting breakfast, and like, if I see a stranger, I'll oftentimes, in fact, I kind of like almost judge my day by how many strangers I've interacted with. But I always want to leave people feeling safe, feeling comfortable, feeling like it was a net benefit to our interaction. If it's an authentic compliment, even if it's a small thing, I find that oftentimes opens the conversation. And even more than that, it's sort of a test in the waters. Because if I say, I'm just making this up, like, man, I really love that bracelet. Where'd you get it? And they respond in a way that invites further inquiry, I know they're open to a conversation, right? It's a very simple thing. It's basic. I think to me, leading with a smile, and by the way, like a lot of this is just practice, I mean, I thought about it now, like, but it comes from, I think, just literally putting yourself out there and trying to find, I think the key is finding a place of rapport. but being invited in. So like you can knock on the door, but I think a lot of people don't maybe take the social cues to know whether they're invited in or not. I will totally respect someone's boundaries. If I say nice bracelet and they're like, oh, thanks, beautiful, I'll literally say, have a wonderful day. Because you can tell in the tonality, you can tell in the way they respond, whether they're inviting further conversation. And so I think the answer to your question to me is deeply listening. And most communication is nonverbal, right? So it's listening to the words, but also the body language, and just getting very attuned to understanding, is this person feeling disarmed and curious enough to, in that childlike sense, have a playful conversation, or are they wanting their own space? Either way is great.
Excellent insight. And I'm going to practice that. So thank you. As a curious person who researches everything extensively, you're a very intelligent man. I'm just curious to know, in your opinion, what are some of the most important issues of our time right now that we should be thinking about and aware of? And we don't have to go into great length on them. I'm just curious on a macro top level what you think some of those are.
Wow. Well, I think I could go into great depth on a variety of things.
We'll have to have you back on the show.
I'd love to. To just get top line. I think the environment is absolutely critical. We are already a mass extinction, and not to be. I don't think fear is, but I think we need to be real in that we've got to figure out a better way of being with our planet. I think the gender issues are essential. We've been living in a patriarchal society for far too long, and I think the rise of the feminine is upon us, and I think that that's going to require the commensurate rise of the masculine, the mature masculine. And so and I think that touches on a lot of issues. I also feel that inequality, most civilizations fall because of dramatic inequality, and we are unfortunately moving into an area where the distance between the haves, which are few and far between, the 1% of the 1% and the have-nots, is ever widening. And that is always, always, always an indicator of a civilization about to fall. So I think we need to really think about greater equality and how we find our way back. And then health, is a passion, I think, for both of us based on what we've seen in our own families. But my dad, to me, he's shown me in dementia. I've done the deep research and realized, they're now calling dementia sort of type 3 diabetes. Half the U.S. population is pre-diabetic. Half the Chinese population is pre-diabetic, which means in 10 years, if those lifestyle, environmental factors, et cetera, which are oftentimes markers for the exacerbation of that sort of inflammatory lifestyle-based disease, obviously, which I won't go into great detail, but with genetic markers, but those that basically we're going to have a whole new category of challenges which will have profound implications, not just in the way that you and I know about, which is in the familial distress, the implications that come from seeing a loved one slowly drift from the shore, but also in terms of the profound economic and social consequences of seeing some of our valued members of our culture and our society have a tremendous health burden.
I can't even put into words like the impact and effect that Alzheimer's has had on me as a result of watching my dad go through it. It's just like, it's indescribable, the impact that it's had on my life. And I know it's really inspired you. So I think that that's really commendable that you've taken this obstacle of your dad being sick and, watching him, in real time. I know you use the metaphor of drifting from shore, which is just so sad and so painful, but really utilizing that as an opportunity to take action. And I know for you as well, to live authentically and share your song. So I want to ask this question, and this is a question that everyone who's tuning in can ask themselves as well. And but we all have heroes, and I believe that we actually individually embody characteristics of our heroes. So for the sake of this exercise, I wanted to invite you. I know your dad's a hero of yours. What are the greatest characteristics of your dad that you feel you embody?
Yeah, well, my dad is. He's taught me so much as it relates to the gift that is gratitude. And so even and especially amidst the challenges, which you know as well as anyone, of seeing a loved one go through, you know, it's like a multi-year mourning process. You know, it's not, I don't wish it upon anyone, but I choose to see any obstacle as an opportunity. That's how I've decided to deal with it. And in that, I believe I've started to hopefully embody some of the gratitude that he has taught me.
Those characteristics that you mentioned about your dad, I most certainly see them in you. So I'm glad I asked that question, because I'm a firm believer. A lot of the people that we look up to or idolize, so many of their characteristics live within us. And I know for me personally, I can be hard on myself at times, that when I remind myself and I give myself that perspective, it really makes me feel good and, you know, is inspiring and empowering. I have one more question before we get into the end of the interview. You're doing amazing work with Peak Mind. You got the podcast that just came out. I'm curious to know kind of what we can expect next from Peak Mind, whether, you know, great interviews are coming up or just, you know, more in terms of the ultimate vision of what you're creating.
Yeah. Yeah, the podcast launched this week. Yep. And I decided to launch. I wasn't going to, but I was advised to launch with the event, which I actually did as an honoring of my father with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And Forrest Whitaker gives an incredibly eloquent introduction. And
I was there. It was amazing.
Yeah. Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela and Gandhi. It was blew my mind. I will continue to launch. We have some, I mean, I've spent about 3 years, so I've got some pretty beautiful episodes that I think will be a real value for people's lives. So, I would, you know, my intention is to share, and I'm in discussions around what Peak Mind can be in terms of what will be the most valuable for people as a tool to help them unlock their own potential and discover their true gifts and voice. And so that's the vision right now. That's the focus. Yeah. I definitely have the intention to birth a book in the not so distant future.
I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, I can't wait. Well, I don't know if I can't wait to write it. Yeah. I think that'll be a very, very tenuous and challenging process, but I think that's something that's coming up for me. And I'm also very committed to the possibility of digital, because of obviously we live in a global world and we have an urgency as a globe to figure some things out. So my vision is to combine the digital and analog in a way that has value for people's lives and ultimately creates impact from the inside out.
So as we wrap up this interview, I know I encourage everyone to check out the Peak Mind podcast. A great interview with the Dalai Lama is already up there. What else can we do to support you?
Just subscribe, rate, and review the podcast would mean the world to me, because that obviously boosts it up in the algorithm and gets more people that see it organically. And I put heart and soul into it. You can go on peakmind.org and subscribe. That's basically the way in which I share my information with my community, or find me anywhere on social at Michael Trainer. And, you know, I think the biggest thing people can do is to, you know, find their song and to sing it and to share it with me, because I think, as I shared in the initial instance, what the world really needs is for people to come alive and to sing their songs, because it takes. We're all here at this. This just goes to my own personal sort of worldview, but I believe we're all here for a reason, and we're all here at this moment for a reason. And it's incumbent upon all of us to support each other in coming into our deepest and most authentic selves, which I know is your passion and your work in the world. And so I think that the more that we support each other in community and helping each other come alive, the better we'll all be.
I could not agree more. So the last final question, just any closing words or wisdom or insight for listeners of Are You Being Real to live an authentic and fulfilling life?
My God, I just wish for everyone that whatever it is within you that is wanting to be birthed and born, that you have the courage to start putting out there in the world, and the community to see it and encourage you to continue in that gestation process. And, you know, my hope is that whatever your song is, you sing it, and I'll be listening.
the one and only Michael Trainer. Dude, you're welcome back anytime. That was amazing.